6 p.m. on April 10th, 2019. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Here.
Jay Fisher.
Here.
Richard Flint.
Here.
Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Emily Swistag.
Here.
Lauren Wayne.
Here.
Quorum being present, we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is opportunity for visitors to speak. Just as a reminder, the visitors have 5 minutes to address the committee. Sir?
Thanks, Jay. My name is Tom Duffy. I just want to say for the budget, I think this was a lot of work went into it, and kudos to the staff and Tatiana, because anytime anyone's ever gone through a budgetary process, lots goes into it. I do want to recommend tonight that you do not vote on the budget. With the election and with 3 new board members coming on, they have not had a full chance to look at this. I would recommend either delaying to May or to June. I'm not aware of any monies that may have to go out in July, if I do see to that. But if there is any potential for a delay, that would be my recommendation. So
Thank you. Any other visitors wish to address the committee?
As it turns out, I will concur with the last speaker. As just a normal citizen, it seems like the amount of time that's given to look at the budget is so limited. I mean, I think you put it out on Monday and through Wednesday. So it takes a good bit of time to go through the material that's out there. And from my standpoint, it's not enough time to give people who would have interest in it to really delve into the numbers that are there in this proposed new budget. And certainly from the standpoint of the fact that we do have a new board coming on board, and whatever you approve now, probably they're going to be stuck with. So I think it would be apropos to allow the new board to have a vote in this working budget. Thank you.
Any other visitors wish to address the committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of the March 13th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting. Those were included in your packet. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of the March 13, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting.
I second.
Minutes have been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none?
Richard Flint.
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Emily Swistag.
Aye.
Lauren Wayne.
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Aye.
By vote of 6-0, the motion is approved and the minutes of the March 13, 2019 committee meeting are approved. Item 4 on the agenda is the meat of the meeting, which is the fiscal year 2019-20 budget discussion, which will include costs associated with personnel, employee, and trustee development, special reserves, building and maintenance fund, expense summary, revenues. So at this time, I'll turn the meeting over to the director, and if we could let her get through her presentation before we ask her questions, if we can go back and ask questions on any of the parts that she has discussed. So, Tatiana.
Okay. I'm going to begin again. We did have a committee of the whole meeting last month that talked about the majority of our categories, and that was posted a month ago. So those items were out for everyone to see. But I'm going to begin again with a brief overview of how the library manages its expense lines and how it relates to residents' property tax bills, because I think it merits repetition. So tonight we're discussing the working budget for fiscal year 1920, which begins on July 1st of this year. The budget will guide us until we pass our budget and appropriation ordinance in September. That's our authorized expenditure document. The budget is very separate from our tax levy. The levy ordinance is the process by which the library determines the amount to tax residents in order for the library to operate. And we do this in December. The budget, on the other hand, is our blueprint for spending until we authorize those appropriations. So the library's adopted a lower tax levy for the past 2 years. And we've also decreased the budget for the past 2 years. This year, we've identified a number of projects and yet have to determine larger capital projects. So I'd like everyone to keep those in mind when we discuss the 1920 expenses. And just because we may have an increase in a line in this budget does not necessarily mean the tax levy will increase. We could have a higher budget due to projects that we've identified while still passing a lower levy at the end of this calendar year. So this evening, we're discussing the entire draft of the working budget. Last month, as mentioned, the committee discussed the costs related to building, operating, insurance, contractual, equipment, materials, programs, restricted use, and contingency. And since the last discussion, we made a few modifications to a couple of those lines, and we've used yellow highlight. And we'll get to those adjustments as we move through the draft page by page. There are 4 new categories since last month, those being employee costs, personnel development, .02, and special reserves. We also show the library's revenues page and expense summary pages, and that expense summary categorizes the expenses by fund. And just a reminder that some of the budgeted line items for 1920 have an increase solely due to moving the .02 expenditure amounts into the corporate fund. The board eliminated the .02 levy last year, but that fund still exists, and we are now accounting for those expenditures using corporate fund account lines. So this year we've also added 2 new columns to the budget sheets, the actuals through mid-March and projections through June, this being a board recommendation last year. So now I'll outline the basics first. In sum, this working budget reflects a approximate 2.7% decrease in expected revenues, and that is mostly due to the decrease in the levy. And this was approved by the board in November of 2018. There is a 2.9% increase in overall expenses without the special reserve expenditures. And when you include those special reserve expenditures, there is a proposed 9% increase in the budget. So now I want to break down those costs in the cost categories beginning on page 14 so we can look at the details again and also the new categories, and we'll do this in order. And we'll begin with the big one first. That's employee costs. Water. So this category primarily covers salaries, insurance, IMRF, and FICA expenses. You can see that under the actual salary subtotal, we've decreased this line for the past 2 years, and we actually project yet another decrease through this fiscal year. We have had a number of turnovers in the lower pay grades as of recent, and I've worked with department heads to determine better personnel arrangements within their departments, and I'll continue to do so. This is also the year we've planned to have staff pay more into their health insurance costs. So I've factored in a 90-10 model for the staff, and I've also factored in a 40-60 model for dependent coverage. So this will bring us more into alignment with other local libraries in our area. The library currently has 57 staff, of which 30 participate in our health insurance plan. So we're going from a 95-5 plan to a 90-10 plan, and we'll also provide a more complete family plan, family coverage, going from a 25-75 plan to a 40-60 plan. So in total, you can see that there's only a 1.94% increase request for total employee costs for fiscal year 1920. This minor increase factors in raises where they're warranted, and also factors in a minimum wage increase at our lowest pay grade level for the library page position. This is the only pay grade level where I've increased the scale approximately 12%, moving the starting pay for our pages from $8.89 to $10 an hour. All the other pay grades show a scale increase of 1.9%, which aligns with national and regional CPI. So in your packet, on page 28, I've included a comparison chart of the current pay scale and proposed shift to 1.9%. And again, I just want to remind everybody that this is only a scale that allows the library to document our starting pay scale per grade. We definitely want to attract quality candidates and remain competitive in the market when a hiring opportunity arises. So that's why we adjust the salary scale every year. The board will vote on the proposed salary scale adjustment in the regular meeting again tonight at 7. This adjustment coordinates with other area libraries, as evidenced by those rail postings to the right of that chart there, and those all meet the job description criteria we have here at the library. So again, in sum, I think this is a reasonable increase of 1.9%. It includes the potential raises, a minimum wage increase for our lowest pay grade, and the new health insurance plan adjustments. The next category is building costs. We discussed this last month. There's no change here. The next page is the operating expenses, and we reviewed this category last month. There was no change there. The next category is insurance. It is the same as last month. The next category is contractual, and there has been an adjustment made since last month, and you can see this with the yellow highlighting. We've included a $3,000 placeholder for an OPEB actuarial report. So I'll explain it. The two auditors, we've invited a number of auditors via RFP, and two of the auditors called with questions, which we answered on the RFP, but they apprised us of this OPEB, and they recommend having this report done by a third party as part of the audit. And this is per GASB Statement 45, and they estimate the report to run anywhere between $1,500 and $3,000, so that's why that is there. OPEB stands for, I believe it means other than pension post-employment benefits. And Ginger, jump in if I don't describe this correctly. It's under the Illinois Insurance Code, and because we're part of a pool, we must offer IMRF eligible staff to continue to purchase health insurance, but on their dime. So because we are part of a pool, there's a liability to that. And I believe we only have one person.
Right,
In that,
there will be one person.
There will be one person in that range. But all the auditors will say that we should have this report, and so that's why we've upped the amount in this line. Okay? Next is personnel costs. This category covers meetings, dues, conferences, and training for both staff and trustees, and we've kept this category flat. The next page is equipment costs, and there is an adjustment here in yellow. We've renamed the major equipment wide line to technology and hardware because that better describes the account. If you remember, we moved the expense line from the .02 to the equipment category, but the term major equipment is a bit vague, so hence the change to technology and hardware. We also added a line titled facility under this category for smaller equipment purchases, such as replacing tables, chairs, and desks. And then the next page is materials, and that remains the same as last month. The same is true for the program costs on the next page. And then we get to special reserves. Here you will see a marked increase. I want to remind everybody that this is a plan for primarily capital expenses. And you can see that last year we budgeted $280,000, and to date we've only spent $4,000 of those dollars. But this was due to holding off on projects until the board makes broader decisions about our facility. Saying that, the strategic plan objectives and subsequent physical plan committee discussion has really shaped this plan for expending the special reserve funds in 1920. You can see under the facility and campus, there's a book drop detail, stormwater management planning, curb repairs on the campus, and air handler replacements. Under furniture and equipment, we've marked what we call bin shelving for the youth services department. Under consulting, whether we do something on our footprint here or otherwise, we should plan for some project management expenses. Under interior renovation, we've identified some paint and some molding. The building needs some attention in that area. And we've placed RFID and keyless entry under the security account line. And we talked about that in our physical plant committee meetings. The next fund we're talking about is that O2 fund. Just another reminder that we have approved of dissolving this tax levy, but there still is a fund. And we will be spending as statutorily required on the building and maintenance of the facility. Our intention is that this fund will be spent by the end of this fiscal year, but that's weather dependent as well as schedule dependent. So we should be depleting that fund, but just in case some of the projects cannot be completed before July 1st, we've allowed for $10,000 in the budget to be able to spend from that fund. And then the last two categories remain the same as last month. There's no change there in restricted funds or contingency funds. So in summary, all in all, I believe this to be a very practical budget with identified projects that should sustain the library until broader decisions are made regarding improving our facility. We have begun that process of assessing the life cycle of our current building and look forward to a comprehensive report this spring. And that should help the board shape decisions about our future improvements here. We are basically in line with the inflation rate, even with the implementation of smaller projects. So a 2.94% increase, I believe, is very reasonable. And then if you add the special reserve projects, I believe these are warranted projects, such as our stormwater management issues, as well as some of the other projects that have been identified via the physical plant committee. Okay, that's my presentation.
All right, thank you, Tatiana. If we could, I guess, go back and start from the beginning. The first was revenues. So if there's any questions or comments about the revenue page of the budget?
The quick question is, I know there's been some discussion recently in town about impact fees, but would that be, are we going to receive some impact fees this current fiscal year, or some of it going to straggle in next fiscal year?
I do have more information about that in my director's report, but as of Monday, we received $4,000-ish.
Okay. So that would be, then there probably would be some maybe that would trickle in next year?
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
Okay. And that, but we haven't budgeted that in the revenue?
We haven't, because we just received.
Okay.
Tatiana, what is the TIF surplus corporate?
Ginger, we added this line.
Yeah,
it's new.
excuse me. That takes into account the Navistar TIF that we get every year. It's been slowly decreasing, and before we used to put it into, we budgeted it in back taxes, and this year we wanted to separate it out, so we created a new line for it.
Yeah, traditionally, it was just always put in the back taxes,
Okay.
but I talked to Ginger and I thought, I don't think it's clear, so pulling it out and creating its own line, I think made sense.
Okay, thanks.
And what was that this year? Do you know how much we got from that Navistar tip?
It was like 37 something.
Okay. And you said it's been decreasing, so 35
Yeah.
is a good estimate of what we think we're
I mean, it could be
gonna get?
less, I don't know.
Okay.
How much was it this year?
37 something, I don't.
So should it appear in revenues actuals?
Yeah, it goes into the, when we receive it, it goes into the tax levy corporate line.
Wouldn't you want it to appear on the same line this year versus next year's budgeted? Wouldn't you want to move it is my question.
Well, we were told to always receive it into the tax levy corporate line.
Okay, we're told by whom?
Kim Schiller,
And who is?
she's from the village.
She's the finance director of the village.
Okay, to me then, it makes no sense to budget it under one category, but receive it under a different category. I don't really have a preference which one it is, but to me, it's hard to understand when you're receiving it under one, but then the next year you budget it under the other.
Well, we can ask the auditor when,
That'd be great.
okay.
So have we received it for this year yet?
Yes,
Because I looked on the one above it where it says back taxes corporate, where we budgeted 40,000, but we've only actually received 2,000. Is that, I thought that's where you said it would go for this year, no?
it goes into the top line.
The top line, okay. Any further questions or comments about the revenue page of the budget? All right, seeing none, we'll move along. Next one was,
The expense summaries are just the expense summaries, they're just separated by fund, the same numbers.
we'll go to employee costs. Questions or comments of staff about employee costs?
What percent of our overall costs are employee costs?
Generally 60. I don't have that exact calculation though.
Which I believe is generally a little
That's the
lower.
standard.
Yeah.
But I don't have the exact.
Yeah.
I can get you that.
Well, I think the employee cost assumptions are fairly reasonable. Assumptions are fairly reasonable, and I think this 1.9%, it's I would say is probably benchmark and industry standards, competitive landscape. And I think one most important thing we talk about, when we did the community survey, one of the biggest asset for the library is the people, the staff that put all the programs together. And I just make sure that, for competitive, from employee cost standpoint, we need to be competitive in the market and retaining good people. So I feel the budget for the employee category is very reasonable.
Under employee costs, do we have any employees taking courses, certificate or degree courses? We used to.
Occasionally, a lot of that is done online, so yes.
Well, we still.
Personnel development.
We still pay for it, whether it's online or personal. Is that reflected here?
I believe that comes out of our employee development line.
So then what would 564610 tuition reimbursement, that's zeroed out, that's been moved somewhere else, or is that where it had been?
That's for when you take classes for a degree.
Yeah, and we haven't, and that's, getting a full degree, we haven't had any requests for that. We can always apply an appropriation for that amount, should we receive a request, but we haven't received a request for a degree.
What about the conference travel, that kind of
That's in personnel development.
Any further comments or questions on employee costs? All right. Nothing-
I just have a
Sure.
question. I'm looking at page 10, personal development. I see where there's a budget column of what's being requested. Can we?
You're looking at page 10, Liz? Or is that's the expense summary, is that?
It's
Yeah.
expense summary page, and it's got page 10 on it.
Okay.
And there's a column that says budget fiscal year 1920. How do we compare that, total personal development staff? The budget's 28.6. How do we compare that to what we spent or project to spend at the end of this year?
You should, if you want to look at the projections, I would recommend looking at the detail under personnel development.
What page is that, Tatiana?
And that.
19.
19, yes, on page 19. You can see that. So we'll get to that as we work our way through. But now we'll get to building costs. Nothing had changed. Operating costs. Nothing had changed from last month. Insurance costs. Contractuals. Sorry.
Just out of curiosity, I have a lot of people asking me about Swan. Do you go with one or the other, Polaris or Swan? Are they both?
Polaris is our operating system, our ILS. Swan is a consortium, and we are members of Swan, but we do not use Swan as our catalog. We use Polaris as our catalog. We use Swan for interlibrary loan. We check other libraries that way.
Okay, I guess, and maybe the budget's not the time to talk about it, but, people are sending me, oh, look I can go into Swan and I can find a book and go, get it myself, and it takes less time. So I didn't realize that it's something we already are part of.
Mm-hmm.
We're just choosing not to make it available to the end user, or?
No, it is available. We are members, and we utilize Swan in terms of pulling books that we don't currently have.
But what I'm saying is, does the end user have access to Swan here the way they do at other libraries?
It's an online platform.
Okay, so they can go into it. Okay.
All right, and insurance costs, nothing had changed from last month. Contractual services costs, there was one change for the OPEB.
Yeah, so I do have a question on that one. So Tatiana, for the OPEB actuary assessment, was it part of a new requirement for GASB
I
that we
believe
have to
so.
implement? Because we haven't done that before, just make sure it's
Yes.
not missing, we're
No.
still in compliance.
I think it's since 2017, it's a highly recommended practice for our libraries to perform this report.
Even though right now we only have one person,
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking in terms of, if it's highly recommended, but it's not required, and only have one person, what's the risk of us skipping for a year? But that's something that we can talk about.
Well, prior
when
to
it
this,
comes.
we didn't have anybody on it, so.
So it was
our
never
cost
applied
wasn't-
to us before?
Right.
Okay,
So, and now we do, so.
all right.
Tatiana, could you just go over, because it went by kind of fast, what we would be paying for OPEB?
That is just, we put a placeholder there for $3,000. That report can run anywhere, this is according to a couple of the auditors we spoke to, $1,500 to $3,000.
What's it do?
It's an actuary report that reviews who you have as a liability paying into the insurance pool on their own dime. It's the concise way of putting it.
It's a cost for retirees that purchase our insurance.
Okay.
And is that report just filed and kept here, or does it have to be sent to the state, or?
I don't think it has to be sent
I
to
think
the
it's
state.
part of our audit
But part of the
process.
audit? Okay.
They said we needed to have it done before the audit. And,
Also, someone is telling us we have to do this, and we haven't been doing it.
Highly recommended.
well, we haven't had anybody that had our insurance, and now we do have a retiree that is purchasing it.
So it's after they retire, it's maintaining insurance coverage for them? That's what it is?
Right. On their
Okay.
dime.
I got it.
Almost like.
But part of our
Yeah,
pool.
that's
Okay.
like COLA.
Got it.
I have a question, Jay.
Sure.
On contractual, we have a facility appraisal included in HR source and so on. I thought that was also included in consulting. We budgeted 75,000.
It's a different appraisal.
It's a different appraisal?
This is our fixed asset appraisal.
Okay.
That's right here, and.
You're
the
saying
other-
facility appraisal is fixed asset?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And is that done by the auditor, or do we hire someone else to do that?
We hire somebody else to do that.
Any further questions on contraction? Now we are on personal development. Go note on page 19 if you had questions about that, Liz.
Hang on.
Charlie.
19.
Yeah, I'm just checking to see if I had questions on the ones previous. No.
Okay. Then we'll move along to equipment costs, where we have some new line items that were included. Any questions or comments on equipment costs?
Just renaming.
There's more reorganizing.
Okay, regarding the yellow ones, technology, what do we typically be buying?
These are the equipment costs that we used to have in our .02 lines. So we had technology equipment in our .02 lines, so we're talking about servers, switches, cabling, computers, monitors, all of the above, hardware.
Well, thank you, but there's still a lot of detail. I assume it's partly replacement, partly new.
Of course.
Is there more detail you could give us?
Well, we've discussed this in the physical plant committee. There was a project list that was distributed to all the board members, and it did appear on that list.
Maybe you could recapitulate.
Well,
Normally, and I've asked for this in 2 previous meetings, normally you have the tech committee or the tech person come in and they actually do a presentation and they include a schematic of what your technology looks like today and what you can do with it and what your future plan is, and they separate out like a replacement project, what you're doing to replace things, and also what you hope to achieve. So, you know, I mean, that's pretty standard, and I've asked for it twice, but
I'm not asking for anything that extensive. I just would like to know, are we planning to, for example, increase the number of public PCs? Or is our servers so woebegone that we have to totally replace them? I just want something in the middle.
Okay, so to respond to both of you, we had talked about a technology plan, and that won't only be issued to one board member, that will be shared with the entire board. So that is being developed with our IT manager. This was discussed in our physical plant committee. And to answer your question, we do have this chart that was distributed to the board. We have PC monitor replacements. We have laptops for staff as well as PCs for staff. We have PC and monitor replacements for the public. We have 2 switches that need replacing. We have wireless POTS lines. We have hours with our outsourced IT consulting firm. We have a server room battery backup. We are looking at a new PA system for the library. We have to replace some of the public OPACs, which is the online catalog accessible laptops. We have to replace a 48-port switch, and then we have our keyless entry also as part of those projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the technology plan, you said the technology IT director is working on?
Yes.
Do you have a estimate as to when
Well,
that may be available?
At the physical plant committee, we talked about a possible April, May. I'm still shooting for spring, so we're looking for that.
Any further questions or comments on equipment costs? All right, materials haven't changed from last month. Program costs haven't changed from last month. Then we're on to special reserves.
I have a question about special reserves. There was a line about consulting, and I couldn't figure out whether that was another new consultant or if it referred to a consultant you'd already discussed.
I think we are placeholding a line here for project management consulting expenses. Should, depending on what the board decides in terms of broader capital projects, we should budget for those expenses under that line.
So the answer is another new consultant called a project manager. Okay. Do we still have the guy we hired back in 2012?
Jack Hayes.
Are you talking about Jack Hayes?
The guy we hired back in 2012?
If that's Jack Hayes, then we have hired Jack Hayes to perform a life cycle building assessment for us. Yes.
Has his function changed?
Well, this report will talk about our current footprint. It will, I know Beth has more detail in her assistant director's report, but we're going to assess the current footprint, our campus, our properties, see what it will cost us to maintain the building, as well as replace major components, electrical, HVAC, the roof perhaps, the masonry, the foundation, all of those things.
So I have a question on the security system, the 140,000. I'm just saying that in the physical plan committee, you guys developed this project list. Assuming there's a level of prioritization as to how you want to spend the money. So how did in the type of in prioritization, where did security system land that deserve a special item that we want to do for next year?
Well, I think that the committee was holding back on any of these, the keyless entry especially, until our facility assessment. I think that the board needs to make a determination about either staying within the current footprint or doing something other than that. So we're kind of waiting for that assessment to have that larger discussion. I know that at the committee meeting, we talked about possibly moving keyless entry into the 2020 budget year. It's still part of the 1920 budget year, but towards the end of that year, until we make some bigger decisions.
Any other questions or comments about special reserves? All right, then we're at O2 Building Fund. Any questions or comments about the O2 Building Fund?
So just to confirm the $10,000 is the placeholder in case we have money still in.
Yeah, and that's more than less likely due to weather or scheduling with the contractors.
Do we know what's in that fund today, the total amount?
I think that's whatever is showing in our financials is going to be different because we have had a number of projects started this month. So, and they're in process. Ballpark it.
What did we say? 81,000?
81,000 at the end of March.
And what are the ongoing projects that we have that's going to spend down that money?
There is my project list again.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
We are purchasing laptops. Those are the ones that the public classes use. We are replacing the public PCs to get them up to the current Windows software. We are doing planned tree trim and removal later this month. We are planning on seal coating the parking lot.
Tamper-proof backflow wheels for the sprinklers
And
ductwork for the administrative department.
Any further questions or comments on the O2 Building Fund?
Yeah, I have a question about the PCs. I've been in here, early in the morning, all times of day. And the most I've counted are actually 6 simultaneous users. So how many PC stations do we envision having?
I mean, I'm not sure your 6 simultaneous users is an accurate count. We're in here late every day, and it fluctuates up and down. Sometimes we've got 6, sometimes we have 14. Upstairs, I know it's very highly used, the 7 that are upstairs.
Yeah, I'm only counting the downstairs.
Okay. Well,
After school, it can be full
Yeah.
because the overflow comes
it
downstairs.
does, and we can definitely speak to that with our technology plan.
Yeah, I thought that, you know, when I first joined the board, what we agreed upon is that you would use software to tell who's using the PCs for what duration. I mean, I remember distinctly talking about that, and I thought it was agreed upon. You know, I could probably check my notes if you want to know what date, but it's kind of like there was an agreement to have it done, and I thought that that was going to be done before we decided how many PCs that we really needed to upgrade, how many do we need to have.
Well, there are times where they are all full. That is a fact. And we can have a usage report as part of our technology plan. But regardless, we need to upgrade the PCs we have.
We used to keep track of, like, I think when I even first started, right, where they, like, show, like, if there was a wait or not for the computers, and we got rid of that, though, because there really wasn't a wait once.
We added, that's when we added computers.
So then we turned that off, right, because, or we stopped keeping track because there really wasn't a wait time after that?
We do have a wait system.
Okay.
It gets utilized on the weekends.
Okay.
Generally on Sundays, because we're only open a short amount of time. So that's when I'm aware of that wait device. It's kind of like a, when you go to a restaurant, you get a little flavor.
Yeah.
So that's been utilized, but we can look at the usage in our technology plan.
Going
We
back
should
to
update
the-
what we have.
To the computers we intend to buy, what mix of computers? Will it be Apple, will all these PCs?
We are looking at 2 Apple PCs, one for upstairs and one for downstairs.
Regarding printers, will we have more variety in printers, or will we still have default black and white printers?
We have color printer.
Will we have more?
More printers?
More
I
color
don't think we
printers.
need more printers at the stations that we have.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm just looking at the monthly circulation report we always get, right? It does have, maybe it's not exact in terms of understand the usage, but the indication, they got computer tech session logins. So that's definitely a clear indication of how often you use it on a monthly basis. So we have that data. I don't know whether that's kind of drive the whole replacement schedule for PCs or not, but you know, we have the information out there.
Oh, I was interpreting that to mean something else. I thought that meant people who brought in computers and did a tech session.
And I think wireless use probably would be people
Yeah, that's
brought in
wireless.
computers and log on. So this computer tech session would has to be the library
Ours,
computers.
yes.
And I'm assuming that's both upstairs and downstairs?
Yes.
And the replacement schedule is based upon the recommendation of our technology personnel?
Our IT manager, yes. I mean, computers go, every couple of years you want to update them. Not physically, but like the software and the hard drive, the RAM.
What will we do with the discarded?
We recycle them.
We used to donate them to outfits like the PRC.
We do offer, but we haven't done it this year. We have offered some of our devices, but we're going for a replacement of our iPads with Apple, and they're giving us a discount to turn in our old iPads for new iPads.
Has there been any discussion about having laptops available for checkout?
That has been brought up a couple of times.
I brought it up.
I know. I know. I haven't heard it from really anyone else.
Okay, so I'll take that as my answer.
But it doesn't mean we can't consider that.
It is being considered, that's fine, that's fine. No, that's all right.
Any other discussion, question, or comments on go to building fund? The last one we have is contingency, which hasn't changed from last year. So are there any just questions and comments overall on the complete budget, now that we've gone through each of the sections?
And mine is Tatiana, the complete budget is what percent over last year?
Okay, the working budget reflects a 2.73% decrease in expected revenues. And then again, this is mostly due to the decrease in the tax levy that the board approved in November of 2018. There is a 2.94% increase in the overall expenditures without special reserves. When you include special reserves, those capital fund expenditures that we've identified this year, there is a proposed 9.39% increase. So all in all, I believe this is a practical budget. I mean, we've identified projects and any increases have been discussed and I think are reasonable. And again, we are also assessing our building to make those broader discussions, and I think that 2.94% increase is in line with the inflation rate. We're basically in line with inflation, along with implementing some of the smaller projects we've identified.
So when you say 4% increase?
2.94.
Okay, you're comparing budget requested over budget of previous year, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that, just for clarification, nowhere is that done in the accounting world. And I've checked with the local governments, nowhere is it done there either. So I'm just going on record saying this is a highly unusual way to do a comparison. And I know you've written to me, Tatiana, about how, you know, the library has projects and we can't use year-end estimates. Well, to be quite honest, the library has much smaller projects going on than the Park District or the Village. And they too have employee costs that go up and down, and yet they still compare it to projected year ends the way they don't do requested budget over previous budget, which you and I have talked about. I've talked about it to this board. It's highly unusual. It is not standard operating procedure, and I don't think we should be doing it that way. I think it makes us a target for, you know, the number one thing that the board does, the most important thing that the board does is approve and administer a budget. That's the number one goal of any board. And I personally have a problem going along with doing it in a non-standard, incorrect way.
Okay.
So I guess I'm looking at my other board members and I'm saying...
I would say that in my experience that this is not uncommon for a governmental body. When I was on the fire district, we always compared our budgets to the prior year's budget. From my experience on the District 203 Finance Advisory Committee, you always compare the budget to how it was from the previous year's budget. So, I mean, yes, if going forward, the board wishes to compare the budgets to the year-end projection, that's acceptable. I think that's also a good way to look at the budget in terms of comparing it to projections, but I don't think it's out of order to compare.
Have you checked with them recently?
Not with the fire district recently, but for my time.
Well, and I'd like to refute something that you mentioned, that I said that I don't look at projections. I never said that. And we implemented the column you recommended as to put those in. So we did use those, and we are documenting that. So we're actually showing both ways of looking at it.
I think one of the reason I think sometimes they use the projected year and projected as a basis for comparisons for next year's budget is because there's a big issue, we talked about this before in terms of counting method, right? This is a cash base versus accrual. We don't do accrual adjustment until, around the audit time to make entry to our book. So therefore, the projected year end is not accurate.
I guess I would, and I totally agree with you, I understand the difference. In the past, I guess I would ask you, how much has a year-end projection been off? You said, it's not accurate. Is it inaccurate by hundreds of thousands of dollars? I don't think so. I mean, is it 1% inaccurate?
I don't know. We'll have to go back to the audit books and see what was the cash basis before the audit, what it is after. A lot of time, there's some timing issues that the auditor has to make adjustments for. But I'm just saying, regardless, but I agree with Jay's statement is that both methods is acceptable. But if you use projected, you have to understand there's going to be a margin of error that we need to build into comparison. That's one. And then if we say we're going to use the budget to budget, that's also a reasonable way, because budget from last year is what the board approved, right? That's what your basis is on. And then for this year, you say what you approved last year, do we need to build some level of efficiency for this year? I mean, it's again, the baseline I don't think is that important. It's just that the changes, I think, is important from year to over year. As long as you're, this is just personal preference. I think both methods has its own value, right? It has its own merit in this
And I agree
process.
with you totally. My request was, if you're going to show budget, what you're asking for as a percentage of what the previous year's budget was, why can't you also create a column on the same Excel spreadsheet that shows the budget that you're asking for as a percentage over projected year-end actuals? It would have been a very painless, easy thing to do. There's room. I've asked for it. I think this would be my third time asking for it. And it, just to follow up on your statement, Longry, you said it's appropriate to look at both of them, and both of them have some risk of being inaccurate. So doesn't it make sense, therefore, to include both? Especially because it's creating a copy and a paste and going.
I mean, again, that's fine for future board if there's going to be want to add a couple more columns to do budget versus budget, and projected actual versus budget. That's fine too. I mean, I think end of the day we need to think of what's the purpose of having what is considered a good working budget. That the working budget doesn't add additional, increased tax, payers burden, maximize our value, and supporting our strategic plan. And for the areas we talked about, which Tatiana's budget shows, like we said, we're going to invest in technology, right? We increased our hardware investment. We increased our programs that supported youth programs and supported technology programs. So that's where we need to look at, hey, does this budget supporting our strategic goal? Maybe there's a difference in terms of line items, how we should be budgeting, plus minus percentages. So I think we just need to think about what is considered good budget. Just by numbers dropping year over year does not necessarily say that is a good budgeting process. But again, that's kind of my personal opinion. So.
And I agree with everything you're saying, and to me, we could easily lop off the column that says actual fiscal year 16-17, because I really don't think that applies to the budget process that we're going through now for fiscal year 19-20. So lop off that column, insert the column I'm talking about. It'll all, I've already written the formula. I've already done it for every page. It takes like 20 minutes. I mean, I just cannot believe that it takes so long. I mean, I was even told matter of fact by you, Jay, that I shouldn't be asking for information, and the information isn't necessarily given to the trustee who asked, which makes me feel like I need to FOIA things, because if I'm any person who submits a FOIA, I would actually be able to get the information, even if I'm a trustee that can't get the information. And I double checked. I requested this information in an Excel spreadsheet on March 9th in email. And then I requested it again on March 13th in email. I requested it 4 more times to get the budget information in Excel. So I would have had all of this done. It doesn't take forever. So, you know, I'm trying to say, like, you know, I'm not going to say anymore. It's obvious what, you know. I think it's obvious.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Seeing none. I believe the next item on the agenda is a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
There
I
is a
second.
motion. There is a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The committee as a whole is adjourned at 6:56.